Welcome to the Shared Path. I'm Maggie Linton. Our next guest shares his early life as a Creek and Cherokee Indian growing up in Oklahoma. Award winning author Eddie Chocolate's heartwarming, adventurous, and loving memoir is This Indian Kid. Eddie, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Maggie.
I'll tell you, I was so excited when I got this book. As I was telling you just before we went on, I grew up on Kickapoo Street. So I feel like there's a real kindred spirit there. But what made you decide it was time to write this book?
Well, I've written a collection of short stories that was published by Black Sparrow Press out of Boston, and in doing that, I touched on some of the occurrences that happened when I was a kid, but didn't really make it into the story I was writing. This didn't really fit, or maybe a few lines, but I put that aside and thought that would make a story on its own at a later date. And I started writing one of the chapters and showed it to my agent, and he was wondering if I had more of these from my childhood. And I said, yeah, I've got tons of them. So that's how that started.
Right. Well, let's go back and talk about your childhood. You moved a lot, but you also had a resilience and love and spirit that just kept you going all the time, didn't it?
Right. And most of that falls back on my grandma, who we called Granny. That makes her sound old, but she was only like late 30s, early 40s when I was a kid. But yeah, the only time I went to school, any one school for 3 years in a row, wasn't until high school. And even now, being here in Minneapolis, going on 4 years, I think that's a record for me, being in one place all the way up to now. Even from, because after school, I went to college and I went to different jobs, and I went here, went there, changed jobs. None of them for more than 4 years.
Wow. Well, that sounded like me kind of. I grew up solid for about 17 years and then I started doing the moving around thing too. So I totally understand. But let's go back and talk a little bit more about that family strength that you had from your granny and Homer, because Homer took you out in and helped you learn a lot about his love of nature and
Right,
fishing and hunting and a little bit of everything.
right. Uh, some of my earliest memories are going fishing with him and my dad, and it was something that we didn't depend on it for food, but we ate everything we caught. Usually that very same night. Uh, that got me going to all around the different lakes and rivers in the area which he knew, and just a good way to bond with a grandpa like that.
They also did homeschooling for you. We hear a lot about homeschooling now, but that's exactly how you learned to read and write, was because your grandparents kept you at home and taught you.
Yeah, they sure did. I was the only kid, even though I didn't go to kindergarten or Head Start. I was the only kid in the first grade who knew how to tell time, because they had already taught me at home, along with the basic reading and math. So I wasn't behind when I started first grade. Uh, so I don't think any kid should be behind when you first start first grade. I think everyone should be on the same level. But I was the only one that knew how to tell time, or I was the only one who spoke up, I guess. But
It may have been, because by then, we're talking about 70s, 80s. We're talking about digital clocks. And
yeah,
not every school has digital clock, and seeing the hands move.
yeah,
You said in the one chapter, and when it clicked one more second, then you spoke up and said, hey, here's the time. Got that
yeah,
gold star too, didn't you?
right.
That's what that's wonderful. All right, we have to go back and also talk about your good friend Lonnie Hall. Lonnie and you say even to this day is a very special person in your life.
Right, Lonnie. one of my longest friends. He still lives in Muskogee. Uh, I don't know if he's seen the book yet, but he's going to be surprised. His sister gave me some of his pictures from when he was a kid. So he's going to be surprised when he sees this, if he hasn't already. It just came out yesterday, but I never did tell him. He was
Talk about,
also
go ahead.
he was also mentioned in one of the stories in my first book,
Talk
but it was
about how that
fiction.
friendship started because you all had some great adventures. you, you and the
Yeah,
dogs.
yeah. He lived near us. We lived off a dirt road, and he lived like half a mile on towards town. And then, we started going to the same schools. We'd ride the same bus, be on the same baseball team. And since I was fairly close, he would come visit after school or in the summers, and just baseball, fishing, hunting. Now, he was the hunter. I didn't have, all I had was a little BB gun, but he had a full blown 20 gauge shotgun. Which, thinking back on it, two kids out in the field, at what, 10, 11 years old, carrying around a shotgun. That is kind of strange when thinking back on it. Although I never did have, I got a shotgun when I was later, like 18 or 19. But to think that, two kids in the sixth grade are out there prowling around the woods with a shotgun, some people would be taken aback by that, nowadays. With all the talk of guns and weapons, but we just use it. He just used it for hunting. It was a big. His whole family was a big rabbit hunting. They had beagle dogs who are like were trained for rabbits. That's all they did was look out for rabbits. But we also fished and played baseball and typical, growing up small town America type stuff. But his mom was a teacher.
So you knew that you were with the right person because he also, well, I won't say was forced to learn, but he knew he had to do well in school too because his mom was not going to put up with anything else but that, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right, you've brought up your baseball a couple times, but let's talk about the two coaches who really also helped shape your life. AC Richardson and Coach Bob Brenman
Brandon.
Brannon.
Yeah. Well,
Those two men changed your life, didn't they?
yeah, they sure did. AC was my first coach of anything on any level, and he's the one who gave me the MVP award. Probably because he couldn't give it to his own son, which probably wouldn't look right. But AC, uh, he's since passed away, but me and his son were in the same class or age, Alan Richardson. And also, AC was a teacher at Muskogee High. So it seemed like growing up with Alan in school, I'd always see Mr. Richardson around, especially when I got to high school. And then he was also a referee. And when I started writing sports, I'd see him at basketball games. And of course, he remembered me because he'd known me since I was 5. And the other one would be Coach Brannon, who is my high school baseball coach. Now, he's the one who, as a former sports writer himself, taught journalism. So at the end of one team gathering, he told me and another player that you two are going to be in my first hour journalism class. So it wasn't like he didn't say, "Do you want to take my journalism class?" It's you two are going to be in my journalism class. So that's how I started. And then he saw I had a knack for it, and he turned me on to the local newspaper. So I started writing for the local daily paper when I was 16. So those two guys, yeah, really had an influence on me.
It's funny how you kind of fall into it. And he said, start doing stats. And we all know that in sports, stats drive the game. along with the players, but the stats, in particular in baseball. Oh my goodness, it's amazing how many stats there are, isn't it?
Oh yeah, there's stats now that I have to look up as what does RISP mean? I mean, just give me the batting average. You know, they say a guy's hitting 600 something, but what it's totally meaningless. I just want to know what his batting average is. I don't care how hard the ball exit velocity, I don't really care about all that. But
In
yeah,
scoring
stats.
position.
Yeah,
I used
but
to do
stats.
sports.
Oh yeah.
So RISP, that's what it stands for. But there's so much information now that it's almost overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, it's overwhelming where you lose track of the actual game itself, what's going on, like what's the old saying? Like you don't see the forest for the trees. You get too wrapped up in the stats.
Yeah, very true. All right, let's talk a little bit more about some other influences in your life. Uh, Shorty and Roman, along with your mom.
Yeah, Shorty was my dad, and they were divorced when I was, I think, only 3. So Roman and Homer would be what I would consider the main father figures in my life. I didn't really get with or start uh, mingling with my dad until I was on my own. I had my own car, so I'd go see him. But growing up years, it was mainly, Roman or Homer, my grandpa, the one I went fishing with and stuff.
Your mom, well, people would think that you were an only child, but you weren't. There were other brothers and sisters, and I like the way you sprinkled them in because your book is really a series of short stories and events that just kept your life moving. And bringing them in was also important to let folks know that you had more.
Right. And when I was writing it, I was going. It was such a fractured existence. Like there was hardly ever a time when us 4 kids were under the same house at the same time, and that was only for a few years in Tishomingo. Either my brother and sister would be living with their grandparents somewhere, or they'd be with mom, but I'd be with Granny and Homer. So it was hardly ever like we were all together at once, except for a few times. So I'd have to think back. When I was writing the book, I'd go, well, if it was this year, that means Anthony was born. Where was he? Stuff like that. Doing this helped me put together my own, kind of help make my own life a little bit more clear as I sat down. And in fact, I had forgotten that I had thought I went to the first grade all at one school. My mom sent me a bunch of pictures and my old report cards, and then I remembered, oh yeah, I didn't even last the whole year at my first school. I transferred back to Muskogee at the end because here was the report card, and I forgot all about it.
Yeah. Well, you were kind of an escape artist when you first started that regular school, weren't you?
Yeah, I was terrified of the paddle. Being my first experience in a school, no Head Start, no kindergarten. So that was my first experience ever seeing a paddle, and it was huge, about that wide and that long. So I think that triggered me to take off from school, and then well, what happened was we were supposed to line up and go to the cafeteria. For some reason in the line, I just peeled off and walked home. My mom was going, I thought, aren't you supposed to be at school? Don't you eat at lunch there? Because this was the first day. I think everything was going to be okay. Mom drove me back to school, waved, but there was another kid opening the door, and he had to say, of all things, Miss Parker's going to get you with that paddle. So that was the first. I was already terrified of it, and have this kid tell me, "Oh no, now I'm going to get beat." So I just kept on going out the other doors.
Went to another friend's house, you know.
Yeah.
And then you kept, but the parents were not putting up with it. They kept sending you back, didn't they?
Well, they figured she figured something was wrong here. Why is this kid who's the classmate of my own son, who's at school? Why is this kid sitting in my front room? What's he doing away from school? So she got on the horn and started, I guess, calling school or calling the cops, and that's when I decided it was time to hit the road again.
Talk about your heritage, Cherokee and Creek. You you talk about it in such loving ways. And like you said, uh, you didn't have a phone, you didn't have a TV, but you never felt that you didn't have everything that you needed.
Right. Looking back on it, we did have a TV, but it wasn't like nowadays. It might be the main focus of your life. With all the streaming things available. It didn't really revolve around that. I was out on my own in the country, so forced me to do other things like just get out in nature, run around with the dog, go fishing, play baseball, read, read a lot. I just had stacks of books from the library. There was no just sitting around the TV for hours. One, there wasn't hardly anything on. We only got three channels: ABC, NBC, CBS. There was no Fox then. Oh, there was a PBS, educational, but it just didn't revolve around. My life didn't revolve around TV. But growing up, Creek and Cherokee is my dad's side, and I'd say I identify more with Creek only because I was raised up with my on my mom's side, which is the Creek side. Even though
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, even though my dad was Cherokee, I spent a lot of time with him growing up. But later on in life, I became more acquainted with my Cherokee side.
The things I really loved about your book was in the opening showing the land that was actually owned by Native Americans and how they had to move because they were constantly being forced out of their land. And it's you don't you explain it, you don't seem to have any hard feelings or anything, but your family's lives changed because of that.
Right. You might go all the way back to Georgia, and then the discovery of gold is why we get ran off our land there. So then we go to Oklahoma. Okay, just they think Oklahoma's worthless. No one wants to live there. Let's put him there. Then they find oil.
Oil.
Then it's okay. Now we're going to move him now. So it's almost like a never-ending shuffle for my tribe.
Well, it's greed. Greed
Yeah,
on the white man. Uh, and we're not talking about people right now, but what happened back then, it's just the way it was. And it was greed and them not wanting you to have as much. They felt like they should own everything. And your
yeah,
family still survived and thrived.
yeah. That going from Georgia and Florida and Alabama
Alabama. Hmm.
in the middle of winter, it wasn't like, well, let's wait until the best conditions for these people go. It's like, well, who cares? If they don't make it, they don't make it.
Yeah.
Put us on ships, going up the Mississippi River, getting stranded by the Mississippi River when it froze over, people dying left and right. They didn't care. I think there was some monetary value. If this guy died, would give his family $50 or something.
Yeah. Well, it's called the Trail of Tears, and you hit on it, but it's at the same time you keep moving. Um, let's move on because your breaks came, because of your coaches, but you also made the most of it. And then from eventually high school, moving on to Stanford and that writing and how that changed your life.
Yeah, that all the Stanford thing happened because of I had gotten tired of writing sports. I had been doing it since I was 15 or 16. And after about my second job, I started becoming more aware of the other things out there, and I heard about this art school called the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. So I applied to that, got in. I quit a newspaper job to do that, and I was all excited. Go to a new state, see the mountains for the first time.
Yeah, the Sandias.
Yes, and I was in the library, and I overheard this guy talking about. I think I'm going to get into that Stanford Stegner program at Stanford this year. I'm on the long list, and I overheard him, and I asked him. I said, "What's this program?" He told me it's this creative writing 2-year fellowship at Stanford. They only take 5 people in fiction, 5 in poetry each year. And he goes, "I think I got a shot. I've been trying for years to get in." I said, "Oh, really? Okay, well, good luck on that." So I started looking into it, and they wanted like 35 pages of fiction. And since I was had some fiction from I had taken creative writing at that school, so I had some stories. So I spent the winter break going over them, picking out which stories to send in, sent it in, and then got in just like that. And the kid has never forgiven me. He'd been trying for years to get in, and here I didn't even know what he's talking about, and I got in on the first shot. So I think he never lived that down. I don't think he ever got in either.
But you did.
But I did. That's how I wound up at Stanford. It was really quite a journey. Leaving Oklahoma for the first time, going to New Mexico, and then winding up on the coast, which in a million years I would have never imagined that I'd wind up there. And then after that, it just kind of the train continued. Then I got back into journalism and found an opportunity. I was in Tulsa, and a former boss said, "We have an opening down here at Fort Worth. It's a bigger paper, more money." I applied, got there. Then it continued on like that. Just pursuing jobs is one reason why I moved around so much. Like I say, if you're a cook at a restaurant and you're in like Dallas, thousands of restaurants, chances for you to cook. But if you're a sports writer, there's one or 2 papers, not that many slots. So you got to go where the job is, and that's why I've traveled around so much.
I know you and I have a common love of the Kansas City Royals, which is why I wore my Royals t-shirt today.
Yeah.
And I now that you're in Minnesota, there were some guys who went from the Royals championship team up to Minnesota. Kane, Muskogee, and a few others. So you are in a good spot right now, though it gets too cold for me.
Yeah. Today though, it's supposed to be 86, which might
All
be a
right.
record. Might be a record. But
Yeah.
the Twins, I live right down the street from the Twins Target Field. I can see the scoreboard from my balcony.
Wow.
So I still love baseball. And the Kansas City thing was, they came on the radio all the time in Oklahoma. So it's like I was always bombarded with the KC Royals. Freddie Patek, Hal McRae,
Like,
White, yeah.
yeah. George Brett.
George Brett, of course.
Yeah. We could go on and name more, but
Yeah.
I'm going to have to wrap it up. Listen, thank you so much. Wonderful talking with you. Once again, many thanks to award-winning author Eddie Chuculate. Many thanks to award-winning author Eddie Chuculate. His wonderful memoir, This Indian Kid, is one not to miss for a better understanding of Native American life and pride. His book is available everywhere. Learn more about Eddie through social media on Twitter, aka X, at Eddie Chuculate, Instagram on Eddie Chuculate, and Facebook at Eddie Chuck. Until next time, seek peace and spread lots of love. I'm Maggie Linton.
Oh.